was talking to Ito earlier today about this, and this is something I came across earlier, and it was really interesting. And I posted it on the geology site. I think about what it was the Vitrified Forest. I think it was in somewhere in Europe here, Scotland. And I think I had posted it here. I'm going to try to get over. Once I get to the geology page, I'll share my screen here.
Okay.
But then also came across what they're called vitrified forts in Scotland, where they're hand-built forts. You can see where the stones are laid together, but it's some other time shortly after that because they have no mortar whatsoever, but the stones are completely fused together.
Continuing the Electric View's April 15th show, we end up talking about vitrified forts and possibly how they got to be that way. In addition, we get to see Buddy's fractal branding machine work up close and personal to see how some versions of this may have occurred. Take a moment to like and subscribe below. I first heard about them in Arthur C. Clarke's Mysterious World.
Yeah, it just reminded me of that wall that we saw in Three Fingers Canyon. It was just where everything was fused together the same way.
They tried to actually use fire to create this effect, to melt the rocks by putting holes in the timber or right through it, and they lit a bunch of rocks on fire and tried to create this effect and failed spectacularly. There was nothing, no amount of heat was going to do this and melt those the way that you'd think they could.
Huh.
But that's this is what reaches into the Ravenna Mosaics and the Great Comet of 535 or 539. I can't remember exactly. 536 even. I don't know. And this the comet, from all descriptions, hit England. And that might be when these events occurred, because then after those events, people started going to England again.
Right.
Because apparently, could you imagine something that would have destroyed all life there or something, whatever that might have been? But
Is everybody seeing my screen now?
Not yet.
Not yet? Okay. Try that again.
Are you sharing?
I was trying to, I think. Maybe it didn't go through right. Let's see here. Try again. Is that good?
It looks good now.
Okay. So we're seeing the vitrified forts. I have some images here. It kind of looked like that same conglomerate we saw around the lake bed. Some of these pieces here. And then there's also just fortified structures. These are just blown out pieces.
Cool.
Where is it? What is the city? Do you have the name of the fort?
I don't know the names of the forts. They're just called vitrified, because these stones themselves have all been fused together. Some of them even have air pockets from being what they say it came to a molten state, and they have air pockets floating through them. But everything is completely fused together here into just one conglomerate.
And that is where, it was, like I said, I found it on that old show there, and it was very mysterious. And it's one of those enigmas where you begin to wonder, were these old forts that people lived in or whatever, and then they were, because of this event that went over top of them, and it pulled the electrons out and fused this material, because it's a large conductive ring, because much of this rock is relatively highly conductive, and it was at the top of something. So it became the highest peak in the area. And so it basically began to have a Corellius glow about it as electrons are pulled through it from the landscape.
Yeah, that almost looks like it's going into agate right there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this is beautiful. I bet you could find some wonderful examples of metamorphosis in here.
Right.
Because there would be certain hits.
That post, I think that some Thunderbolts posted about or maybe, I don't know if it's about Thunderbolts, but it's also titled on YouTube, not only Sodom and Gomorrah, like Star Wars, ancient Star Wars happening. This lady, I think, in Uzbekistan is talking about how there were two other structures like this, two fortresses, one on a lower level and, one on higher ground. And one was just completely destroyed. The other one has, fused walls like this completely, but there's a lot of etching and pitting in the wall structure.
Well, there's some etching and pitting here, actually. If you notice, there's pits along the top of those ridges, which is what would have happened. Imagine lightning strikes that would have done that. Pow, 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 pow. Right. Yeah. Could have been pretty nasty.
Okay.
That's his interpretation, though. It could be wrong.
Right.
Well, I'm looking at Old Sarum, in Salisbury, because it's the way that is shaped and the description that you're giving would be a good overview of like what the intentional fort would look like. You know what I mean? It's an Iron Age Viking fort in England and Salisbury, and it's like the same kind of a thing where they're circular enclosures, and then the way that the hills are come up around them. That this is the way that these things are melted together like this. So then somebody was talking about the ability to pour granite in the same way that we now pour concrete, but these are like poured granite. And then Julian and I when we were at the museum, we were looking at the different Egyptian sculptures, and some of them look to be poured, and some of the ways that you can tell are by the keys, because when you mold something, when you forge something, or you put something into a mold to produce multiple blocks, or however these are formed, you wind up with like little keys to release them from their mold or holes in them, where sprues were where things the material was poured in. And so a lot of times in these you can kind of see those indicators of being poured.
Well, then, but there's also the problem of this, where you're now looking at a cutting. Go back one.
Yeah.
Although I like what you like. There's a part of me that really buys that, like I really do, because there's things that do look poured in certain cases. But in this instance, here I am seeing them having cut into a wall of stone, like the living rock. And in my mind, this must have been fairly easy for them. Like I don't mean it's just something that you wouldn't. They look like they can do it, and
yeah.
And this is why I question what happens when you live on a material like we know it to be granite. Sure, that sounds great, but what is it now? When it was in the past, like is it more electric, or did they do this after it just fell? But it would have been so hot they couldn't have done that. You know, you don't just go up and goes, oh, here's a massive destruction. Oh, let's do some construction too, just to fuck it up. You know, like no. So there's none of that, I think, going on. I think that they were like, and they electrically connected with those little tins too, those little pins that seem to connect the keys, whatever they are. But they would make that each rock would therefore be able to, because that stuff's conductive when they pour metal in it. And it's not just for holding it together. The whole thing becomes one electric unit, if you know what I mean. So it doesn't, because if they made it all equal in charge, it would have an equal rim at the top of if it ever got hit. So it would survive longer and be one solid piece. It's what happens when you have like one part sticking up. Now, later on, we found that, you know, just having one part wasn't so bad because the electricity had gone down so much. And the highest thing you had were cathedrals. So I don't know how they managed. Like, look at that. That's been clearly messed up.
Mm-hmm.
It's well, it would have had to been sustained, and it would have been for a while. If those forts are what we thought they are, Viking forts, whatever, and then the whole rim of that thing would have just been glowing blue, so to speak, you know, with like Royale's glow coming off of it. And the current would have been reaching up from right through the ground, because it would have been the highest point in the area. And all you need is a little rain and you connect to the water table and that'd be it. So.
Mm.
This weather here in Michigan is insane. There's like 2 inches of ice on everything.
Wow.
The Ecorse Creek is in my neighbor's backyard. It's like halfway up their backyard right now.
Wow.
I've never seen that before, ever.
Oh.
Are you actually getting an ice storm, you said, buddy?
Oh, yeah, we're getting a bad ice storm. Like, work is, like, delayed and stuff. Emily went to work delayed because it was so icy out. And, yeah. We had like texts all night long, like winter storm warning.
Yeah, that could be some nasty stuff. We actually had an ice storm in the area that was just the worst. It knocked out, like we had, this one knocked out power for 6 days in some areas, but we had to call in the National Guard sometime in the mid-90s. Like it was like, could you imagine every branch, everything was just like covered completely in ice. Speaking of which, that made me wonder if that's an electrical event.
Okay, well, so Jupiter was the bringer of storms, right? And Jupiter is in retrograde, and there's all these crazy planetary alignments this month. There's a lot of planetary alignments. A lot of them have to do with Jupiter, like things tugging on Jupiter. And here we go with all these crazy, crazy storms. And, you know, and there's these, I kind of said it at the beginning of the month. I don't remember what I said, but look out between the 12th and the 17th because it's going to get rough. And then we just had this coronal hole, and there's a CME that's coming around, and then, like, you know what I mean? There's earthquake potential for the next 1 to 4 days. So it's totally lining up with Jupiter, and this is very exciting to me. I know it's terrible weather and things are happening, but the fact that we can make these types of, like, you can kind of see these correlations happening just as like a everyday Joe, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Kind of cool.
Yeah.
And so, like, it makes me want to really go back and, like, re-examine what all the earth attributes given to each of these gods were, so that we can start to, like, really look at them and say, hey, you know, Jupiter was the bringer of storms. When he got angry, right, he brought storms.
Right.
Well, also, I was thinking about that this week. Think about all the attributes of emotion. Every emotion that we have, we had a god for. That God was an emotion, and it was that type of emotion, you know, love, fear, anger, hatred, spring, seasonal. So we had gods for all these natural logarithms in life.
This is where
all of them things, and they were just ideas. That's all they are, I think, is ideas.
This is where
constructs.
There's the planets. Those are the attributes to each of the planets. The planets are named after the gods, but all of those attributes are given to those specific emotions or aspects. Those are the houses, and that's astrology, and it's real.
This is where I was having this debate with Neil the other night, and it's the metaphorical aspect of all this stuff, and the sides of the argument were no, it was literal. But I will.
This is my first thought right now. Yeah,
I would support the side that it's metaphorical and very, very Jungian ultimately. There we go.
But
Now, crown shyness, you see, when they connect and they only touch in one certain section, and that the same effect is achieved inside of the canopy of trees, because it's an electric effect, photoelectric effect. Everything comes down to the solar cycle. So if we can look at in morphology and homeomorphology and different morphologies, we can see how everything comes from the sun and solar cycles. But that's another conversation.
I like the carving work on your table there.
I like to burn things.
I like to burn things. No.
So I just put it back in.
You gonna start a new one? Yeah, cool.
Yeah, I'm doing this whole table right here. This is actually my brother's. He traded this for doing some work on another piece. And now I finally am getting to fractal branding it. And you can see how natural it looks like cities forming and circuits and that kind of stuff.
It's very cool how it goes. It's you know, it's always on the outside, and that's where the energetics are, and it's got the line to get there, you know.
And what it's trying to do is it's trying to, if you could imagine that on a landscape, if it was going on a landscape, it's blowing it away. Like it's turning into little tiny pieces of dust, but in this case, smoke.
I have some rocks. I can show you doing it right on rock. High voltage electricity on rock.
It's seeking that opposite because you got a big.
Yeah, it's
got a
flipping
big
back and forth
but-
really
but-
fast too.
But it's got a big voltage potential difference between those your two electrodes there.
42,000 peak, I think. I think
this one's going to be very intricate and beautiful. You can see this table in the back. That's pine wood. This is what happens when you do pine. Pine is one of my favorite by far. You can really see how.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it goes in steps. It's just perfect like a canyon every time.
But this, if it gets cleaned up, it's hardwood, so it looks like it's oak or a different type of hardwood, probably oak. But hardwood turns out really intricate and it burns slow. So what I want to do is I want to classify all of them, and show the canopies of the trees and the arborization of it against the sky and the winter, and also show the reflecting similarities of electrocuting the wood after it's been prepared.
You like using that word electrocute?
Well, it's not electric ugly.
No, but yeah, okay, that's good. Yeah, but I mean, it's like a execution, right? Obviously, right? As far as its onomatopoeia-ish stuff.
I mean, I could call it branding.
Well, I think the actual term would be. I think it would just be electrify, but that's call it whatever you want. I mean,
this is product naming.
Yeah, there you go. Because you're not really killing it; it's already dead, so you can't electrocute it. But you can electrify it and then create patterns which brand themselves to the wood. There.
That's why it's named fractal branding, because it's not, something else. I guess there's a million names you could call it, but
Love in the hat.
Yeah.
Oh.
But
Sorry,
it's definitely branding because it is created by fire. Just this fire is electric. Yeah. So.
Yeah, this is the weather it is outside right now. You can see me.
Wow. You got a boat? Are you
so-
L. Ron Hubbard?
Take us on a trip, Captain James. Hey, oh, Captain James. Hey, oh, Captain James.
So, yeah, this one's
Very
turned out
cool.
good.
Very cool. So it's interesting. Interesting how it goes. Like the red one. Where's the other pole? You got it. Oh, there. Okay.
It's not.
Spreading.
activating yet. I put this one out. If I put that one out, this one will start activating. Should. Whoa. Yeah, that's how you
Be careful.
have to unplug it and reset it. Set it up differently. But yeah, this is.
Well, if you get electrocuted,
I'd like to see what's coming out of that. As far as like what your currents are and what your voltages are.
I think I remember looking at his machine. It was like it was 20,000 volts RMS. So that's like 42.5 or something, 44.5. I can't remember exactly. It's a swing, peak to peak. But, and of course it's AC, but it's, runs like between 40 and 70 milliamps or something like that. It's not too much. Okay. Enough to kill you, but.
At that, yeah, right.
Well, it's enough. I mean, you just have to have sweaty hands. That'd be the end of you.
Yeah. Huh. Cool.
I don't know what sort of safety things it has in it, like
so when you're ready for the next show, buddy, let me know.
All right.
This is pretty cool.
Are you running it again?
Huh? What? Huh?
Buddy, are you running it again? Or?
Yeah, it's not really pumping through. I got it too wet. I have to move the two.
Is that what you put water down on it? Is that?
Yeah, I squirt it with a solution, baking soda water solution.
Okay.
Anything to put some ions to allow current flow.
Yeah.
So if I move it, you'll see that it'll start right away.
I like this demo mode you're doing here. I think this has potential. What do you think, Neil?
Put on stone.
Well, I that's great. We can watch him burn things all day long.
Yeah.
We'll get him a high-res camera for better burning.
Do chemistry experiments. Yeah.
So which way do the electrons flow, Neil?
Both ways. It's AC.
Yeah, it's trying to complete a circuit. Both sides are feeding both sides, trying to get as fast as they can. In a minute, you'll see this side start up on its
Why does
own.
the other side not doing that?
Actually, I'm actually wondering why it's only doing one side
Only
more
one,
than the other,
yeah.
but because it shouldn't.
Here it goes. Look, there it is. It just started. Sometimes it's a little bit too
Yeah.
wet. Sometimes
Yeah.
it's not wet enough.
Well, once it starts,
That's
it's going to
what I'm
happen.
talking
Yeah, you're right. But yet they have exactly the
talking
same
about.
potential. They're just swinging about 42,000 volts in either direction. So it's pulling electrons as fast as it can across that surface. And obviously, it's going to try to burn through the top. That's the easiest layer to go through because it's the one that can stay on fire. Because obviously, as soon as it connects, you'll see the whole channel glow red, like you see it in there. That channel, the deepest part of it, and that's basically the highest current carrying content. And it's stealing it from everything else around it, trying to find the best path to get to the other one.
Mm-hmm.
What would that be called in lightning? Wouldn't it be a leading trail or something?
Actually, that is exactly what happens now. Except it's called a step leader. But you have
Step leader, yeah.
This is basically what's happening. If you imagine one point being the ground and the other point being the lightning bolt, they're reaching to make that connection. And once they do, you'll see that whole channel glow red because it's basically almost a dead short. But it has,
in this case is creating the wire.
Yes, and it's trying to keep it. Once he turns it out by shooting water on top of it, he can shut it down. But you can see it wants to burn through that very hot spot in the middle. That is the connection, which makes me think about things like volcanoes. Where like, is there some current that's just keeping that nice and warm? Why? I don't know for sure, but this is like this is your step leader trying. But there is a ton of different channels traveling. Like little tiny Birkeland currents between this point, that little sparks on the tip and the sparks on the other tip, and they're reaching for each other, and they are trying to make their way. And there's tons of little pathways through that water that are being heated up, but each one is just spreading out in different ways to get there across the surface of that thing.
You can think of anything that has this type of dendritic path or Lichten flow pattern to it. It's a filamenting structure. So you got to think of like a river and its meanderings, but you can see it's happening so fast that the meanderings, we don't even get to see them. They're spiraling, shooting through there in helical branches to push through as current, because current in its fastest form isn't a straight line. It's going to be like, it's be a curved path. It's going to be a wrenching, ratcheting like fashion through any type of substance or material or medium, I would think. And that's why you get the same type of pattern inside of any type of flow. These are just flow patterns. And
you're controlling it right now by spraying water in certain places because it's trying to follow that damp line. Just the line that is not. It's not wet and it's not dry. It's trying to follow that line, the right on the edge, if it can. It's seeking the red point. Yeah, it's going from there to there, but it's traveling. Once it can, it'll go through the edge of the water. It's just following up the edge of the water. And I bet you, if we could actually see magnetic lines of force being generated by the Ampere's law. So you can see like little twists of electron or magnetic lines of force as it's moving along the edge of this water. We can see where most of it's going.
There's my electric pants.
There you go.
To keep it electric.
But I'm very fascinated. It's wonderful stuff.
I'll show you guys some artwork.
Like throw some cardboard out on the pavement, break out some electric boogaloo, and bring it back, buddy.
I do this, and they send me every single festival I've been on so far. They put me right up front, center stage, next to the stage, because this shit's dank and it's electric, and people it's dangerous, you know.
It is dank for those in the hip crowd.
I love that.
Yes.
I love that term.
Touche, sir. I find your
dank memes. I don't know if you heard that one.
Your parlance is verbose.
So you can see how it reminds you like it's mycelial, and you can see how they form like mushroom caps. It reminds me of not only mycelial roots, but like how fast a mushroom is formed. Like, and I keep blowing it.
Phrasing.
And it increases how fast the rate is because of the oxygen flow.
Very cool.
But I can also, so like, I get a feeling of like, you immediately think of tributaries, or at least I do, and I'm very fascinated with life in tributaries, and particularly tributaries where salt water becomes fresh water. And also, look, here it comes, look.
And there she goes.
I knew you could do it.
But see, now along that little stretch, you would have all those plasmoids form. Little dots of plasmoids along that, because it's now able to create magnetic little pinches because it has a perfect current.
Supernovas.
Well,
mini supernovas.
Yeah, I guess.
You're
not technically wrong.
Black holes in like galaxy formation and plasma cycles inside of this type of analogy here. And you can also think the longer that I leave this connection, the deeper it's going to get. So I like it to be deep for texture purposes, so that you can feel it.
This is
like these grooves over here are really deep and they're nice. And this is actually, it's outside and it's been rained on, so it's like kind of like I need to clean my shit up right now. I'm in the process of moving